This is Democracy Now! We're breaking with Convention, War, Peace, and the Presidency. Our guest is independent presidential candidate Ralph Nader. He has run for president 3 times. Maybe I confused you with Eugene V. Debs. He ran 5 times?
He ran 5 times with the statement, better to vote for someone you believe in and lose than to vote for someone you don't believe in and win, who will certainly betray you. That's a very, very important thing for voters to consider when they decide what they're going to do. He was also
disappointed with the American people in terms of activism.
Yeah, a remarkable statement. A reporter asked him, what's your biggest regret at the end of his great career as a labor leader? And Eugene Debs said, my greatest regret is that under our Constitution, the American people can have almost anything they want, but it just seems they don't want much of anything at all. Fast forward to 1945, we were the biggest power in the world after World War II. Western Europe was devastated, but those people pushed and got by law universal health care, decent pensions, living wage, decent public transit, paid vacation, paid maternity leave, paid family sick leave, university-free education. They got it by law. 63 years later, these 2 parties, the Republican and Democratic parties, still have not given the American people what people in Western Europe got decades ago. So we're trying to raise the expectation level, Amy, of the American people. If they become cynical and withdraw, which is what cynicism does, then they're going to lose their country. These giant corporations who hijacked our government are tearing the heart and soul out of America.
Dennis Kucinich addressed the Democratic Convention, and the news we have from the Hill newspaper, he gave a fiery speech. Yeah. He criticized war profiteering, the oil giants, Wall Street, drug companies, and most of all the Bush administration, which he said invaded Iraq for oil. But Obama staffers redacted one line suggesting Republicans should be jailed. The line read, quote, they're asking for another 4 years. In a just world, they'd get 10 to 20.
Yeah. I mean, that's the tragedy of Dennis Kucinich. He's done by February or March. The primaries are over. He will not at all support the Nader-Gonzalez campaign. I mean, he doesn't have to endorse us. We can't even get his mailing list. And I say, Dennis, we're the only people who are going to take your proposals to November. Imagine the Democrats in 2004, they were prohibited from criticizing Bush at the Democratic National Convention in Boston. And now, in 2008, they don't want to raise the issue of criminal recidivism in the White House, the most impeachable presidency and vice presidency in our history, torture, incarcerating people without charges, the criminal war of aggression in Iraq, spying on millions of Americans without judicial approval. That's a 5-year jail term. That's a first-class felony. So the Democrats are really abandoning the rule of law, abandoning the Constitution and its impeachment provisions, and they ought to be taken into account. But you know, Dennis got he got nothing in the platform. They won't give him a comma in the Democratic National Platform.
What do you think needs to be in the Democratic platform? What isn't there? What is there?
They ignore the need for a massive crackdown on corporate crime, fraud, and abuse, which even the mainstream media, Wall Street Journal and others, are reporting. They're allowing a bloated military budget to devour the federal budget away from public works and the necessities of the American people. We have no more Soviet Union. They don't even mention consumer protection in any way. You can't get them to talk about shifting the tax burden to security speculation and things we like the least or dislike the most. You can't get them to do anything other than homilies and hope and change and all that nonsense, when the central issue of this campaign has got to be the corporate domination of our political economy and our government.
And so what you would do if you became president, what are the first actions that you would take?
So I call them the first stage improvements. Full Medicare for all. I mean, 60-some years after Harry Truman proposed it. It's about time. It would save a lot of lives, by the way. Living wage, you know, they don't even talk about living wage. If the minimum wage in 1968 was adjusted for inflation, the way members of Congress do their salaries, it would be $10 an hour. You know what the federal minimum wage is? It just rose to this level of $6.55 in July, last month. It's disgraceful. One out of every 3 full-time American workers is making Walmart wages. You can't provide for the necessities, the barest necessities of your family that way. This used to be the party of the working people, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It's turning into a toady of giant business. They can't ever even use the words corporate crime or corporate welfare or the taxpayers bailing out crooks routinely in Wall Street and other places around the country. This is a bankrupt party. And Dennis Kucinich, in effect, has been told, well, you can have your little speech, Dennis, but you're going to jump in line and salute.
When you're talking about matters of life and death, John McCain says the U.S. could be in Iraq for 100 years. Barack Obama says he wants to pull out a number of the troops within the first 16 months.
Well, his military advisor said that means they'll keep 50,000 or more soldiers, U.S. soldiers, in Iraq at the military bases. We have 22 military bases in Iraq, and 3 of them are like the Battleship Galactica.
What do you say has to happen right away on that issue? What
6 months negotiated withdrawal, all military and corporate forces from Iraq, continued humanitarian aid, UN-sponsored elections, and negotiating with the Kurds, Shiites, and Sunnis what they did in the 1950s, a certain amount of autonomy within the unified Iraq that they all want.
I want to tell our viewers and listeners that in the other hour of Democracy Now!, we've expanded to 2 hours, and if you don't get to see or hear that other hour, you can go to our website at democracynow.org. In that other hour, we played a piece by Democracy Now! Correspondent Jeremy Scahill, author of the best-selling book Blackwater. He went on the floor and saw Henry Waxman, the powerful House chair, House Congress member, and Waxman has called on Obama, if he becomes president, to end military contracts with Blackwater.
And Obama has indicated that he's simply not going to do that. You know what the dilemma for Obama is? He's inheriting war criminals, Bush and Cheney. In all kinds of ways, they've been committing daily war crimes. At what point does he become a war criminal? If he does not issue executive orders and say no to what the regime has been doing, and torture and incarceration and wiretapping and the criminal war and unconstitutional war in Iraq, he's got to think about that. His advisor's got to think about that, because he is going to inherit and pursue and be culpable for these war crimes.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Ralph Nader, for joining us. Ralph Nader, independent presidential candidate, longtime consumer advocate and corporate critic. He is running for president for the 3rd time on the independent ticket. Last